we're going to end up with a very good relationship with Canada and a lot of the other
A
countries.
few months ago, things were looking grim for Canada's Liberal Party. Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had resigned, and the party faced rival Conservatives, led by a candidate with a political style many saw as similar to U.S. President Donald Trump. But on April 28th, the unexpected happened.
The Liberal Party is now set to form the next government.
Who's ready to stand up for Canada with me?
Days later, Australia's Labor Party won big at the polls. The same day, Singapore's ruling People's Action Party extended its 66-year winning streak while gaining a few points in the process. Across Asia, voters in some of the first elections held since the start of Trump's chaotic second term as U.S. president chose stability over populist anger. Is the world turning against Trumpism, or is there more at play in the recent polls? In Australia, the centre-left Labor Party under Prime Minister Anthony Albanese had struggled with its record on several issues. Among them, the mounting cost of living and a housing crisis, top priorities for Australian voters, and reasons many thought the May election would be a close race.
The opposition parties, the coalition Conservative parties, looked to have a chance of victory. And that state of affairs had prevailed for probably 12 months.
Just like in Canada, the Conservative coalition leader Peter Dutton tried for a time to mimic Trump's stance on the economy, immigration, and social issues. But it had the opposite effect to what he intended.
It became even more concerning to Australians, and where it appeared as though the opposition parties had mimicked or copied some of the themes of the incoming Trump administration. It maintained an attack on what it called woke policies. It maintained an attack on the public service, on the character of education in Australia.
In a campaign where economic issues mattered most, the potential impact of Trump's tariff policies tipped the balance. Trump had only imposed a 10% tariff on Australia, but the wider effects of Washington's global levies were expected to have a certain impact on the Australian economy.
We don't really trade as much with the United States as we do with Asia. So China, Japan, and Singapore are our main trading partners. So the direct effect on Australia is going to be relatively minor. So it's going to be an effect, but it's manageable. But the indirect effect of what was going to happen to China, Japan, and stuff, it was massive. I would say it was in relation to whether a major or minor, just another factor on top. So I think it was the cost of living issue that when you looked at the two parties, one party seemed to have more positive and more forward-looking policies which were addressing issues, if not sort of solving, but at least trying to solve them. And then this just was on top of that.
And Anthony Albanese then began to use quite an effective argument, I think, was that what we needed was stability, that this was no time to change, that what we needed was a safe pair of hands. The opposition came across as not confident, not consistent.
The result allowed Labor to solidify its presence in Parliament. The party even gained 19 additional seats compared to the previous legislature. In Singapore, the ruling People's Action Party also got a bump from the Trump effect.
Well, the PAP wanted very strong support. There was no question that they would get a majority or even a supermajority forming the next government.
But rising living costs and the fact that the PAP was led by a newer generation of politicians had raised the possibility of opposition parties doing better in the May elections. Still, the PAP won by a 65% margin, faring better than it had in the previous elections. In the days leading up to the vote, Prime Minister Lawrence Wong said the tariffs were not actions by a friend.
There was a lot of concern over the uncertainty that Trump would bring, and so voters went for what was familiar. I do want to say that it wasn't just the PAP, the Opposition Workers' Party did very well too, but largely because they were familiar. The parties that were less familiar to the public did not.
Yet the Singapore election was not swayed by the Trump factor alone.
The PAP managed to issue vouchers and also some very cheap oil and rice that helped them gain support by addressing some of those costs.
While Trump has had an impact on some elections in Asia, voters going to the polls next in the region are expected to have domestic issues more front of mind. South Koreans will vote on June 3rd in an election that caps a period of national turmoil after the impeachment of their former president. Han Duck-soo stepped down as acting president to run for the top job, promising that his experience working with the Trump administration would help give South Korea an edge. The nation is also dependent on exports to the U.S., and Trump's tariffs could have a heavy impact on the economy. But Han dropped out of the race as he faced growing expectations of an opposition win. Instead, conservative People Power Party candidate Kim Moon-soo will face off against liberal opposition leader Lee Jae-myung. Early polls show Democratic Party candidate Lee commanding a sizable lead. But despite both candidates' concerns about tariffs and the economy,
대한민국의 정체적 위기는 더욱 심화됐습니다. 경제는 최악의 상황으로 추락했습니다.
정말 시장 대통령이 돼야 되겠다. 민생 대통령이 돼야 되겠다. 또 경제 대통령이 돼야 되겠다.
many South Koreans will have the legacy of impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol associated with the conservatives more in mind than Trump. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. was also dealt a heavy blow in crucial midterm elections, seen as a referendum on his term. The impact of the Trump administration played a small role in political debate. Instead, domestic issues and a rivalry between the country's two most powerful political families determined the outcome of the elections.
VP Sara, si Bongbong, di ba? Yun. Kaya para sa akin, hirap. Parang nakaka-stress na yung government kasi. Yung gobyerno nakaka-stress. Yun. Kaya napakahalaga yung boto ng bawat isa at sana pumili ng karapat-dapat.
Marcos is locked in a struggle against his vice president, Sara Duterte, who is backed by supporters of her father, former President Rodrigo Duterte. The elder Duterte, who is currently in custody at The Hague for crimes against humanity, even won a mayoral election in his traditional seat of Davao in the south of the country. As Trump's second term threatens to add to global turmoil, there could be more impact on the coming elections in Asia. But despite the steady stream of headline-grabbing news about the U.S. president, homegrown issues continue to be the biggest motivator for most voters.